the example we had of the 700 megahertz band a while back is if the ITU actually said this band is for broadcasting and for opportunistic access, that might allow some regulators that were having political difficulties talking about white space access to now say, well, we have to open it up for white space access because the ITU has told us. So again, it may be useful to help drive certain regulators down that path. But I don't see it as necessary for those regulations to change in order for white space to be opened up.
Yes, Dr. William. Just you mentioned that if the ITU is say this band is for opportunistic access, what do you mean by that? Because the ITUs allocate the band is to a specific service, fixed mobile or broadcasting.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that, by opportunistic access?
Oh, I just mean that there could be a note that opportunistic access is allowed into this band on a secondary basis or something like that. So it wouldn't change the primary allocation. Now, there'd need to be some definition of what opportunistic access meant, but broadly it would be along the lines of using the band in such a way that no interference was caused to the primary users of the band.
Yeah. All right. It just the last World Radio Communication Conference in 2012 make like a statement or a decision on cognitive radio, and that cognitive radio and software-defined radio are just technologies that and not radio communication services. And there have been two views on the influence of such decision. One of them argues that the decision gives a green light for a regulator to implement or to allow implementation of cognitive radio, and the other views just claims that for many regulators, if it's not in the radio regulation, it's not allowed. What do you think of that?
So when I was at Ofcom, my view of the radio regulations was that unless the regulations explicitly said you couldn't do something, that you could go ahead and do it, because a national regulator has complete control over their country, and I don't believe there's anything that formally binds them to do exactly what the ITU says. So my view was you could just go ahead and do it unless it was really clearly prohibited. But other regulators I've seen take quite different views, and the regulators that are less innovative, I think, will say that until it's changed in the radio regulations, we can't implement it. And they use that as something they need to see in order to bring about regulation. So I think it's mixed, and it depends very much on the regulators themselves.
Yes. All right. Just as you may know, there have been specific provisions in the ITR radio regulation with regard to the Wi-Fi in the 5 giga, and some mandates such as dynamic frequency selection, transmit power control are mentioned, and even those applications or those technologies have a primary allocation in the ITR. Why there haven't been something similar for the TV white spaces? Or should be something like that for the TV white spaces?
That's a good question. I guess in the case of Wi-Fi, it's one of the primary users of that band, and so the regulation has been put in place to allow that to be listed as one of the main users. But I don't think there's a clear difference between that and opportunistic access to the TV white space. So in a way, it would be helpful for the ITU to say you can have opportunistic access to TV bands, and here is the mechanisms we recommend in order to do it, in the same way that they talk about dynamic frequency selection for Wi-Fi, to talk about geolocation database access for the white space bands. So that possibly could be helpful. I hadn't thought about that particular comparison before.
Yeah. All right, Dr. William, that was my last question. And last but not least, do you have a general statement on the issue of interaction between national and international spectrum management regimes?
Yeah, that's a good question. In general, I favour spectrum being managed at a more international level, because it seems to me that it would make life much easier for many companies if they could buy spectrum internationally. It would allow easier changes to services and technologies and so on if it were possible to actually do things internationally. And it would also make it quicker and easier for the regulators if there were just a few international bodies rather than some 200 national entities. So actually, in general, I would favour, for example, there being a single regulator for the whole of the European community. That would seem to me a sensible move from a spectrum regulation viewpoint. However, of course, that only works if that's a good regulator and they make rapid and good decisions. And if it's one that ends up being stuck in bureaucracy, then that's not very helpful. And if we look at the ITU, my worry there is that it moves very slowly because it can only take decisions really once every 3 or 4 years at the World Radio conferences. And in fact, it can be sort of 8 years from the time that you decide you want something on the agenda to the time that it finally gets around to being on a conference and then starts to be implemented. So I think if we are going to move to international spectrum bodies, we need to find ways for them to work much faster and not to have such long cycles of meetings.
Dr. William, it's been an honor and a pleasure just to have this conversation with you. I'm already looking forward to read your new book about the future, maybe 3 years from now. Is that correct?
I'll start another one sometime soon, definitely.
Yeah, and I hope you would include a section on the impact of international regulation.
It's a very good thought. Yeah,
it's a very good topic. And I have found very few people investigating it. But I will keep you updated.
Yes, and I'll be very interested to read your thesis when you get it published.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir, and Merry Christmas, and have a nice season vacation.
Thank you very much. Good to speak to you, Mohammed, and we'll be in touch, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. All right.
Bye.
Bye.